Jacob Steele was not someone you wanted to cross. He walked through the streets of his small Midwestern town like he owned them, his broad shoulders and chiseled jaw turning heads wherever he went. Once a decorated Marine, Jacob had returned, home after years of service, only to find that civilian life wasn't what he'd imagined. The quiet routines, the polite smiles from strangers, they all grated on him. Over time, the respect people once showed him turned into whispers behind closed doors. They called him arrogant, hot-headed, and dangerous. But Jacob didn't care about their opinions. To him, they were weak, soft people who couldn't understand the weight of his past or the sacrifices he'd made. So instead of fitting in, he spent most days drinking at the local bar, picking fights over spilled drinks or rude comments. No one dared challenge him, not because they liked him, but because they feared him. Everyone knew Jacob Steele could throw a punch harder than anyone else in town. On this particular day, Jacob was already in a foul mood. He'd woken up late, missed breakfast, and stubbed his toe on the way out of his apartment. By the time he reached the grocery store to grab a six-pack of beer, he felt ready to explode. The parking lot was crowded, and he muttered under his breath as he squeezed his truck into a tight spot between two cars. His boots thudded heavily against the pavement as he strode toward the entrance, ignoring the curious glances of other shoppers. Inside, the store buzzed with activity. Mothers pushed carts filled with snacks and diapers. Elderly couples browsed the aisles for canned goods, and teenagers loitered near the soda coolers. Jacob moved quickly, grabbing what he needed without paying much attention to anything or anyone around him. That's when it happened. Emily Dawson, a single mother juggling work and parenthood, hurried down the same aisle. She clutched a list in one hand and pushed a cart with the other, her mind racing through everything she still needed to do that day. Her son Timmy sat quietly in the cart, munching on a granola bar. Emily hadn't slept well the night before. She'd been up late finishing laundry and preparing reports for her second job. Exhaustion clouded her thoughts, making her less aware of her surroundings than usual. As she rounded the corner, her cart clipped the back of Jacob's ankle. It wasn't a hard hit. It barely registered, but Jacob spun around instantly, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he barked, towering over her. Emily froze, startled by his reaction. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, taking a step back. "I didn't mean to. I didn't see you there." Jacob ignored her apology, his eyes narrowing. "Didn't see me? Are you blind? Or just stupid?" The words cut deep, but Emily forced herself to stay calm. She glanced at Timmy, whose wide eyes reflected the fear building inside her. "Please," I said, "I'm sorry. Let's just move on, okay?" But Jacob wasn't done. Something about her rushed appearance, her frazzled state, ignited a fire within him. Maybe it reminded him of how chaotic and messy his own life had become. Whatever the reason, he snapped. Reaching out, he grabbed her wrist tightly, refusing to let go. "You don't get to just walk away," he snarled. "Not after running into me like that." Pain shot through Emily's arm, but she bit her lip to keep from crying out. Tears welled in her eyes as she tried to tug free, but Jacob's grip only tightened. "Let me go," she pleaded, her voice trembling. "You're hurting me." A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Some looked horrified, while others seemed paralyzed by indecision. No one stepped forward to intervene. They'd seen Jacob lash out before, and they knew better than to provoke him. Even the store manager hesitated, peeking out from behind a shelf but staying safely out of reach. Timmy started crying, reaching for his mother. "Mommy, please," he whimpered, tugging at her shirt. Emily's heart broke hearing his voice, but she couldn't comfort him, not with Jacob towering over her like some kind of predator. "You need to learn some respect," Jacob growled, leaning closer. His breath smelled of stale alcohol and his tone dripped with disdain. "Maybe next time you'll watch where you're going." Just as Emily thought things couldn't get worse, a new voice pierced the tension. "That's enough." The words were simple, yet they carried an authority that silenced everyone, including Jacob. Turning his head, Jacob saw a man standing at the edge of the crowd, He wore a cowboy hat tilted slightly forward, casting a shadow over his sharp features. His stance was relaxed, almost casual, but there was something unmistakable about him. Confidence radiated off him like heat from the sun. It was Chuck Norris. Jacob blinked, momentarily stunned. Was this really happening? Before he could process the situation fully, Chuck took a step forward, his piercing gaze locked onto Jacob. "Let her go," he said again, his voice steady and commanding. For a moment, Jacob considered ignoring him. Who did this guy think he was, walking in here like he owned the place? But something about Chuck's presence gave him pause. There was a calmness to the man that felt almost unnatural, as if he'd seen and done things far beyond anything Jacob could imagine. Still, Jacob wasn't one to back down easily. Sneering, he released Emily's wrist but squared up to Chuck instead. "Stay out of this, old man," he spat. "This doesn't concern you." Chuck raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Oh, I think it does. Now, are we going to settle this peacefully, or do I need to teach you a lesson?" The crowd held its collective breath, unsure of what would happen next. Emily stumbled backward, clutching her son protectively. For the first time since the ordeal began, she allowed herself a flicker of hope. If anyone could stand up to Jacob Steele, it was the man standing before them now. And then, just like that, the real showdown began. Jacob Steele sneered at Chuck Norris, his fists clenched tightly as he tried to intimidate the stranger. "You don't know who you're messing with," Jacob growled, stepping closer. His voice echoed through the grocery store aisle, bouncing off the shelves lined with canned goods and cereal boxes. Chuck stood perfectly still, his cowboy hat casting a shadow over his face. He didn't flinch or step back. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, studying Jacob like a teacher sizing up a stubborn student. "I think I do," Chuck replied calmly. "And trust me, son, you don't want this fight." The crowd watched, in stunned silence, unsure whether they were witnessing bravery or madness. Emily clutched her son tightly, shielding him from the growing tension. She prayed that Chuck knew what he was doing. After all, Jacob wasn't just some ordinary bully. He was a former Marine with combat training and a reputation for violence. But Jacob wasn't listening to reason. His pride wouldn't let him back down now, not in front of so many people. With a roar, he lunged forward, throwing a punch aimed straight at Chuck's face. It was a powerful blow, the kind that could knock out an average man. The crowd gasped, expecting the worst. Chuck didn't even blink. At the last second, he sidestepped effortlessly, dodging the punch as if it were moving in slow motion. Before Jacob could recover, Chuck delivered a swift kick to his midsection. The force of the impact sent Jacob stumbling backward, clutching his stomach and gasping for air. For a moment, he looked shocked. No one had ever moved like that before. But Jacob wasn't ready to give up. Shaking off the pain, he charged again, swinging wildly. Each punch missed its mark as Chuck danced around him, almost playful in his movements. To the onlookers, it was like watching a choreographed performance. Every dodge, every counterattack seemed deliberate and precise. Chuck wasn't just fighting. He was teaching Jacob a lesson. With a sudden burst of speed, Chuck landed another blow, this time to Jacob's shoulder, then another to his leg. Each strike was calculated, designed to disable rather than injure. Jacob faltered, his balance crumbling under the relentless assault. Finally, with one decisive move, Chuck swept Jacob's feet out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. The room fell silent, except for the sound of Jacob's heavy breathing. He lay there, dazed and humiliated, staring up at the ceiling. Chuck stood above him, completely unruffled, as if nothing had happened. His cowboy hat hadn't even shifted during the fight. "You've got potential," Chuck said softly, looking down at Jacob. "But anger and arrogance will only get you so far. Choose a better path." Jacob didn't respond. He couldn't. All he could do was stare at the man who had defeated him so easily. For the first time in years, he felt something other than rage. Shame. Meanwhile, the crowd erupted into cheers. People clapped and whistled, celebrating the unexpected hero who had stepped in to protect Emily. Some even chanted Chuck's name, though he didn't seem to notice. His focus remained on Jacob, waiting to see if the message had sunk in. Emily approached cautiously, her son clinging to her side. Her eyes were red from crying, but she managed a small smile as she looked at Chuck. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Chuck nodded kindly. "You're safe now," he assured her. "That's all that matters." Then, turning to the crowd, he raised a hand to quiet them. "Let's give him a chance to reflect," Chuck added, gesturing toward Jacob. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Though Jacob didn't say anything, his expression softened slightly. Maybe it was the kindness in Chuck's tone, or maybe it was the weight of the situation finally hitting him. Whatever it was, something inside Jacob began to shift. As the crowd dispersed, a few brave souls helped Jacob to his feet. He avoided eye contact, brushing off offers of assistance. His pride was wounded, but deeper down he felt a flicker of doubt, a tiny crack in the wall he'd built around himself. Could he really change? Did he even want to? Pastor Daniel, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a warm smile, pushed his way through the remaining onlookers. He introduced himself to Jacob, speaking gently but firmly. "Son, I know things haven't been easy for you," he said, "but carrying all that anger isn't helping anyone. Not you, not your community. Let me help you find a better way." Jacob hesitated, unsure of how to respond. Part of him wanted to lash out, to reject the pastor's offer outright. But another part, the part that had been shaken by Chuck's words, felt curious. What did he have to lose? Emily lingered nearby, watching the exchange. She didn't trust Jacob completely, not yet, but she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the hint of regret. It reminded her of her own struggles as a single mother, trying to make ends meet while raising her son alone. Maybe, just maybe, Jacob deserved a second chance too. Chuck noticed Emily's hesitation and walked over to her. "He's not beyond saving," Chuck said quietly. "Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in someone else to spark real change." Emily nodded slowly, considering his words. "I hope you're right," she replied. "For everyone's sake." With that, Chuck tipped his hat to her and turned to leave. As he walked away, the crowd parted to let him pass, murmuring words of gratitude and admiration. No one stopped him, not even Jacob. They all knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a moment that would be talked about for years to come. And as Chuck disappeared into the distance, Jacob Steele found himself standing at a crossroads. The road behind him was paved with anger and isolation, but the road ahead, well, that remained to be seen. Jacob Steele sat in Pastor Daniel's modest office, feeling out of place. The room was simple. Wooden furniture, a few bookshelves, and a small American flag standing proudly on the corner of the desk. Sunlight streamed through the window, casting golden rays across the floor. It should have been calming, but Jacob couldn't shake the unease gnawing at him. Pastor Daniel had invited him here after their brief conversation at the grocery store. At first, Jacob had resisted, brushing off the idea of counseling or self-reflection as a waste of time. But something about the pastor's quiet persistence had struck a chord. Maybe it was the way he spoke. Not judgmental, not condescending, just genuinely concerned. Or maybe it was the memory of Chuck Norris's words echoing in his mind, "Choose a better path." So here he was, sitting stiffly in a chair, his arms crossed defensively over his chest. He stared at the floor, avoiding eye contact with the pastor. "I don't know why I'm here," Jacob muttered finally, breaking the silence. "You can't fix me." Pastor Daniel smiled warmly, leaning forward slightly. "I'm not here to fix you, Jacob. Only you can do that. But I can help guide you if you're willing to try." Jacob frowned, unsure how to respond. For years he'd bottled up his emotions, burying them under layers of anger and pride. Talking about his feelings felt foreign and uncomfortable. Still, there was something disarming about Pastor Daniel's demeanor. His voice was steady, his eyes full of compassion. Slowly, Jacob began to open up. "I wasn't always like this," Jacob admitted, his tone softer now. When I joined the Marines, I thought I'd found my purpose. I was part of something bigger than myself. People respected me. They looked up to me." He paused, his jaw tightening. "But when I came back, everything changed. Folks treated me different, like I didn't belong anymore." Pastor Daniel nodded, listening intently. "That must have been hard," he said. "Coming home after serving your country is never easy. Many veterans struggle to adjust to civilian life." "It's more than that," Jacob continued, his voice rising slightly. "I feel lost. Everything moves so slow here. People don't understand what it's like to live on edge, to make split-second decisions that mean life or death. And then," he trailed off, glancing at the flag on the desk. "Then I started drinking, picking fights, trying to prove I'm still tough enough. But no matter what I do, it's never enough." For a long moment, neither man spoke. The weight of Jacob's confession hung heavy in the air. Finally, Pastor Daniel broke the silence. "Anger is often a mask for pain," he said gently. "You've carried a lot on your shoulders, Jacob. But holding on to that anger won't bring you peace. It'll only push people away, including yourself." Jacob sighed deeply, running a hand over his face. "What am I supposed to do? Just forget everything?" "No one expects you to forget," Pastor Daniel replied firmly. "Your experiences shaped who you are today, but they don't have to define your future. There's strength in vulnerability, Jacob, in admitting when you need help." The words hit Jacob harder than he expected. Vulnerability, that was a concept he'd always rejected. Growing up, he'd learned to equate toughness with silence to suppress any sign of weakness. Yet here was this stranger, urging him to embrace the very thing he feared most. Over the next few weeks, Jacob returned to the church regularly for counseling sessions with Pastor Daniel. At first, progress was slow. Jacob struggled to articulate his thoughts, often retreating into defensiveness when confronted with difficult truths. But Pastor Daniel remained patient, encouraging him to take small steps toward healing. One day, during one of their meetings, Pastor Daniel mentioned a local outreach program for troubled youth. Veterans volunteered their time to mentor kids, teaching them discipline and resilience while sharing stories of overcoming adversity. Jacob listened skeptically at first, unsure how he could contribute. But the idea intrigued him, a chance to reconnect with the sense of purpose he'd lost since leaving the military. "Why don't you give it a shot?" Pastor Daniel suggested. "You might be surprised by how much you enjoy it." Reluctantly, Jacob agreed to visit the program. On his first day, he stood awkwardly at the edge of the gymnasium, watching as a group of teenagers practiced martial arts drills under the guidance of another veteran. The instructor noticed Jacob lingering and waved him over. "We could use someone like you," the instructor said with a grin. "These kids look up to guys like us. Show them what you've got." Jacob hesitated, unsure where to begin. But as he stepped onto the mat and started demonstrating basic techniques, he felt something stir within him. The kids watched him closely, hanging on his every word. For the first time in years, Jacob felt respected, not because of his size or temper, but because of his knowledge and experience. As the weeks went by, Jacob grew more comfortable in his role. He taught the kids not just physical skills, but also lessons about perseverance, teamwork, and respect. In return, they gave him something he hadn't realized he needed: a sense of belonging. Their enthusiasm reminded him of his younger self, before the bitterness set in. News of Jacob's involvement in the program spread quickly through the town. Emily Dawson heard about it from a friend and decided to check it out for herself. She wasn't sure what to expect. Part of her still distrusted Jacob, but she wanted to see if the changes people were talking about were real. One evening, she stopped by the gymnasium where the program took place. Peering through the doorway, she saw Jacob kneeling beside a young boy, showing him how to throw a proper punch. His expression was patient, almost fatherly. Gone was the scowl that used to intimidate everyone. In its place was a smile that lit up the room. Emily lingered in the doorway unnoticed until Jacob spotted her. For a moment, they locked eyes. Jacob straightened up, clearly surprised to see her. Then, Stepping away from the group, he approached her cautiously. "Emily," he said, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "What are you doing here?" "I heard about the program," she replied simply. "I wanted to see it for myself." Jacob nodded slowly, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I know I owe you an apology. What I did to you, it was wrong. I let my anger get the best of me and I hurt you. I'm sorry." His words caught Emily off guard. She'd expected excuses or defensiveness, not genuine remorse. Looking into his eyes, she saw sincerity, the same flicker of regret she'd glimpsed at the grocery store weeks earlier. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "It takes courage to admit when you're wrong." Jacob exhaled sharply, if a weight had been lifted off his chest. "Thanks for giving me a chance," he added. "I know I don't deserve it." Emily didn't respond immediately. Instead, she glanced around the gymnasium, taking in the scene before her. The kids laughed and cheered as they practiced their moves, their energy infectious. Jacob had become a part of something meaningful, a community built on trust and growth. "You're doing good work here," she said finally. "Keep it up." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Jacob standing in the doorway. As he watched her leave, he felt a renewed determination. Redemption wasn't going to come easily, but for the first time in a long time, he believed it was possible. Months had passed since the day Chuck Norris stepped in to save Emily Dawson from Jacob Steele's rage. Life in the small Midwestern town carried on as usual, but subtle changes began to ripple through its fabric. People talked more openly about kindness, second chances, and the power of redemption, and no one embodied those ideals more than Jacob himself. Tonight, the town gathered for its annual charity event, a celebration aimed at raising funds for struggling families. Held in the local park, the event featured food stalls, live music, and speeches from community members who had overcome adversity. It was a night meant to inspire hope and unity, and nearly everyone showed up to be part of it. Emily Dawson stood, nervously behind the stage, clutching her notes tightly. She'd been asked to give a speech, something she hadn't done before. Public speaking wasn't her strong suit, but she couldn't say no, not when the organizers explained how much her story could encourage others. Taking a deep breath, she reminded herself why she was here, to share her journey of resilience and gratitude. As Emily stepped onto the stage, the crowd fell silent. The setting sun bathed the park in warm hues of orange and pink, casting long shadows across the grass. Families sat together in folding chairs, their faces turned toward her expectantly. Children chased each other playfully nearby, while volunteers handed out plates of barbecue and lemonade. For a moment, Emily felt overwhelmed by the sea of eyes staring back at her. But then she spotted Timmy, her son, sitting proudly in the front row, giving her 2 thumbs up. Her nerves settled and she began to speak. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Emily started, her voice steady despite her initial hesitation. "I never imagined I'd stand in front of so many people sharing my story. But sometimes life throws challenges our way that change us and teach us things we didn't know we needed to learn." She paused, glancing down at her notes. "A few months ago, I found myself in a scary situation. I was leaving the grocery store with my son when another shopper confronted me. What happened next? Well, some of you may already know. A man named Jacob Steele grabbed me, refusing to let go even after I apologized. He scared me, not just because of his strength, but because of the anger in his eyes." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, recalling the incident vividly. Emily continued, her tone softening. "But then, something incredible happened. Someone intervened. Someone who reminded me that courage isn't about fighting. It's about standing up for what's right. That someone was Chuck Norris." A murmur of approval rippled through the audience. Emily smiled faintly, remembering the calm authority Chuck had exuded that day. "Chuck didn't just stop Jacob," she went on. "He planted a seed of change. He told Jacob he still had potential, that it wasn't too late to turn his life around. And guess what? Jacob listened." At this point, Emily scanned the crowd until her gaze landed on Jacob, sitting quietly near the back. His head was bowed slightly, his hands resting on his knees. She held his eye contact briefly, offering him a small nod of acknowledgement. Since that day, Jacob has worked hard to make amends. He joined a program mentoring troubled youth, teaching them discipline and respect. He's become a role model, not because he's perfect, but because he's willing to try, to grow. Applause broke out, scattered at first but growing louder, as more people joined in. Jacob sat motionless, feeling a mix of pride and humility wash over him. He hadn't come to the event expecting recognition. In fact, he'd debated staying home altogether. But hearing Emily publicly acknowledge his efforts filled him with a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. Emily wrapped up her speech by thanking the community for coming together to support one another. "We all face struggles," she concluded, "but none of us have to face them alone. Let's keep lifting each other up, believing in second chances, and building a brighter future, for ourselves and for our children." When she finished, the applause erupted into cheers. Emily stepped away from the microphone, visibly emotional, but smiling. As she rejoined Timmy in the front row, several people approached her to express their admiration. Among them was Pastor Daniel, who patted her shoulder warmly. "You did great," he said. "Your words will stay with people long after tonight ends." Meanwhile, Jacob remained seated, content to observe from afar. He didn't need or seek attention. Simply knowing he'd made a difference was enough. Still, he couldn't help noticing the approving nods and smiles directed his way. Some parents even introduced their kids to him, thanking him for his work in the mentorship program. Each interaction reinforced the progress he'd made and motivated him to keep going. Later in the evening, as the sky darkened and twinkling, lights illuminated the park, Emily wandered over to where Jacob sat. Holding 2 cups of hot chocolate, she offered him one with a shy smile. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. Jacob hesitated for a split second before accepting the drink. "Sure," he replied, scooting over to make room. "Thanks." They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching fireworks light up the horizon. Finally, Emily broke the quiet. "You've come a long way," she said softly. "I'm proud of you." Jacob chuckled dryly, shaking his head. "I don't think proud is the right word. I'm just trying. Every day feels like a battle, but I'm learning to fight smarter, not harder." "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working," Emily said earnestly. "The kids look up to you, the town respects you, you've earned that." Jacob glanced at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. "You really mean that?" "I do," she confirmed. "And I think Chuck would be proud too." At the mention of Chuck Norris, they both laughed lightly. Neither had seen him since that fateful day, but his presence lingered in their memories and in the lessons he'd taught them: courage, humility, hope. As the fireworks faded into darkness, Jacob rose to his feet, stretching. "I should probably head out," he said. "Early morning tomorrow." Emily nodded understandingly. "Take care, Jacob. Keep doing what you're doing." With a final wave, Jacob walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Though he left the event unnoticed by most, his impact remained undeniable. He was proof that even the hardest hearts could soften, that even the darkest paths could lead to redemption. Back at the park, Emily hugged Timmy close, savoring the warmth of the evening. She thought about Chuck Norris, wondering where he might be now. Perhaps he was off inspiring others, spreading his message of courage and kindness wherever he went. Or maybe he was simply enjoying a quiet sunset, tipping his hat to the world as he always did. Either way, his legacy lived on. In Jacob, in Emily, and in the countless lives touched by his actions. The charity event came to an end as the last fireworks fizzled out in the night sky. Families packed up their blankets and chairs, chatting happily about the evening's highlights. Children clutched balloons and glow sticks, their laughter echoing through the cool air. It was the kind of night that left everyone feeling hopeful, connected, and grateful. Emily Dawson lingered at the edge of the park with Timmy, watching the crowd disperse. She felt lighter, as if sharing her story had lifted a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Her son tugged at her sleeve, eager to head home, but Emily hesitated. Something, or someone, drew her attention to the outskirts of the park. There, standing near a weathered wooden fence, was Chuck Norris. His cowboy hat shaded his face, but his calm demeanor was unmistakable. He leaned casually against the fence, arms crossed, observing the festivities from afar. Though he wasn't part of the crowd, his presence seemed to radiate warmth and reassurance like a guardian angel watching over the town. Emily's breath caught in her throat. For weeks, she'd wondered if she'd ever see him again. Now, here, he was just as quietly heroic as the day he'd intervened between her and Jacob Steele. Gathering her courage, she grabbed Timmy's hand and walked over to him. "Chuck," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "Is that really you?" Chuck turned his head, tipping his hat slightly as a warm smile spread across his face. "Evening, ma'am," he replied in his signature drawl. "How are you holding up?" Emily blinked back tears, overwhelmed by emotion. I'm good. Better than good, actually. Thanks to you." Chuck shook his head modestly. "Don't thank me. You're the one who's been doing the hard work. All I did was nudge things in the right direction." "But that's the thing," Emily insisted. "That little nudge changed everything for me, for Jacob, for this whole town. You showed us what real strength looks like. Not brute force, but kindness and courage." Chuck chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling. "Kindness isn't always easy, especially when faced with anger or fear. But it's powerful. More powerful than fists or words." Emily nodded, glancing back at the park where Jacob had quietly slipped away earlier. "Jacob's come so far," she said. "He's not perfect, but he's trying, and that's more than anyone expected." "That's all any of us can do," Chuck replied thoughtfully. "Try. Life's messy, and none of us get it right all the time. What matters is how we pick ourselves up after we fall and whether we help others do the same." Timmy, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "Are you a superhero?" he asked, wide-eyed and curious. Chuck laughed, crouching down to meet the boy at eye level. "Not exactly," he said with a wink. "But I believe everyone has the potential to be a hero in their own way. Even kids like you." Timmy grinned, clearly thrilled by the idea. Emily smiled too, touched by Chuck's humility. "Will we ever see you again?" she asked cautiously. Chuck straightened up, adjusting his hat. "Who knows? Maybe when this town needs another reminder of hope or courage, I'll be around. Until then, keep taking care of each other. That's the best legacy anyone can leave behind." With that, he tipped his hat once more and turned to walk away. Emily watched as he disappeared into the twilight, blending seamlessly into the horizon. His departure felt bittersweet, but also strangely comforting. She knew he wouldn't stay. He never did. But his impact would remain forever etched in the hearts of those he touched. As Emily and Timmy headed home, they passed the spot where the mentorship program had set up its booth during the event. A group of teenagers still lingered there, practicing self-defense moves under the supervision of volunteers. Among them was Jacob, patiently guiding a young boy through a basic stance. His expression was focused yet gentle, a stark contrast to the angry man Emily remembered from months ago. She paused to watch him for a moment, marveling at the transformation. Jacob caught her gaze and offered a small, respectful nod. Emily returned the gesture, silently acknowledging the journey they'd both taken since that fateful day in the grocery store. Back at home, Emily tucked Timmy into bed, kissing his forehead goodnight. As she turned off the light, she found herself reflecting on the events of the past year. From fear and despair to hope and redemption, her life and the lives of those around her had changed in ways she never could have predicted. In the quiet moments before sleep claimed her, Emily thought about Chuck Norris. Though he was gone, his lessons lived on. The importance of standing up for what's right, the power of second chances, and the enduring strength of kindness. These were ideals worth passing down to future generations. ensuring that his legacy would continue long after he faded into legend. And somewhere, under the vast, starry sky, Chuck Norris tipped his hat to the world one last time. His job here was done for now, but his spirit remained woven into the fabric of the small Midwestern town and the people who called it home. Hope, courage, and resilience. They weren't just words. They were actions, choices, and beliefs that shaped lives. And in this corner of America, they had become the foundation of a brighter future.